What if the last thing you feel as you die is not fear, but approval? The battlefield is already screaming when the moment arrives. Not the screams of men, but of metal tearing apart, of chain swords chewing through bone, of artillery shells cracking the sky open like rotten fruit. Blood slicks the mud, steaming in the cold, turning the ground into something alive and hungry. You fall to one knee, breath ragged, fingers slipping on the grip of a weapon that has killed too many to count. Somewhere nearby, a banner collapses into the mire. Somewhere far away, a god is watching. You think death will be quiet? You are wrong. As your heart stutters, the world sharpens instead of fading. Every sound grows louder, every color deepens. The copper stench of blood fills your lungs until you taste it on your tongue. And then, beneath it all, you feel something else. A pressure. A presence. Like a hand closing around your soul. Khorne does not whisper. He does not tempt with promises or lies. There is no bargain offered, no choice presented. There is only recognition. You fought. You killed. You spilled blood with purpose or rage or devotion. It does not matter which. What matters is that you did not hesitate. That you did not look away. The battlefield dissolves. Reality tears like wet parchment, and you are dragged screaming into a realm where screaming never stops. The warp opens its jaws, and you are flung into an endless red horizon beneath a sky that burns instead of shines. Rivers of blood cut through black iron plains, flowing upward, sideways, in impossible defiance of logic. Mountains rise like skulls piled by a mad architect. The air vibrates with war drums that beat in time with your pulse, until you realize the drums are your pulse. You understand then that you are no longer alive, but you are not dead either. Your body is gone, stripped away in an instant, yet pain remains. More than pain, sensation, magnified beyond mortal limits. Every memory of every kill you ever made surges through you at once. The faces, the resistance as blades met flesh. The exact moment life fled another being because of you. Instead of horror, something blooms in your chest. Pride. The sensation horrifies you more than the warp itself. You try to reject it, to cling to whatever scraps of humanity you have left, but they peel away like burnt paper. In their place comes clarity. You see your life as Khorne sees it, not as a story, but as a tally. Each act of violence weighs something, each death feeds something, and your soul is currency. Demons stalk the horizon, towering silhouettes of brass and fire, their eyes fixed on you like predators judging meat. You want to run, but there is nowhere to run in a realm where direction is meaningless. Chains of glowing runes snap around your essence, dragging you forward toward a throne so vast it cannot exist in real space. The Skull Throne. It rises above a sea of skulls that stretches to infinity, each one once a thinking, dreaming being. Some still scream, others laugh, many are silent, polished smooth by eternity. At the throne's base, a mountain of weapons, axes, swords, spears, each soaked in the history of 1,000,000 massacres. And upon the throne sits something too vast to comprehend, a presence that crushes thought by existing. Khorne does not speak to you, he weighs you. The pressure becomes unbearable, like gravity turned inward, compressing everything you are into a single point. In that instant, you relive your final moments again. But now, you see them from above. You see the arc of your weapon, the spray of blood, the instant your enemy died, and you feel it as Khorne feels it, pure, undiluted truth. Violence is honesty. There are no masks here, no excuses, no mercy, only action and consequence. You are torn apart. Not destroyed, reforged. The parts of you that knew doubt are ripped away. Fear is flensed from your soul like useless flesh. Memory fractures, leaving behind only the moments that mattered, rage, fury, the ecstasy of combat. Your identity dissolves into something simpler, sharper. You are no longer a person. You are an instrument. When awareness returns, you are standing once more upon a battlefield. But it is not the one you died on. The sky is an endless storm of fire and ash. The ground is iron, cracked and glowing from the heat beneath. Around you stand countless others, some once human, some never mortal at all, each clad in armor fused to their flesh, eyes burning with a single shared purpose. You look down at yourself and feel nothing resembling shock. Your form is massive now, corded with impossible strength. Your hands end in claws that drip with warp flame, or grip an axe that hums with restrained slaughter. Blood runs constantly across your armor, not always yours, never washing away. And deep within you, where a heart once beat, there is only hunger. This is what it means to be claimed. Time loses meaning in Khorne's domain. You fight, you kill, you are killed. And then you rise again, dragged back from oblivion by a force that demands more blood. Each battle strips away what little individuality remains, replacing it with devotion so absolute it feels like joy. The screams of your enemies are hymns. The clash of blades is prayer. Sometimes you glimpse the material universe again. A tear in reality opens, and you are hurled through it, screaming with anticipation, into real space wars. You fall upon Imperial guard lines like a living catastrophe. You tear through Xeno's warbands. You clash with champions who burn just as brightly as you do. In those moments, part of you recognizes the horror in their eyes. You do not care. Khorne's approval is intoxicating. Every skull taken sends a surge through your being, a silent acknowledgement from the throne. You begin to crave that feeling more than existence itself. You would tear apart worlds for it. You have torn apart worlds for it, and yet something lingers. In the brief instants between battles, when the drums fade and the blood cools, a flicker of memory sometimes surfaces. A name, a face, a moment of stillness from a life that no longer feels real. It hurts, not because it is painful, but because it is weak. And weakness is an insult here. You feel Khorne's gaze shift. The pressure returns, subtle but unmistakable. A warning, a reminder. The last threads of who you were begin to burn away, consumed by the same fire that fuels your rage. Soon, there will be nothing left to remember. Only the eternal now. Only war. As the next rift tears open and the call to slaughter echoes across the realm, you step forward without hesitation, raising your weapon high. Blood will flow again. Skulls will be taken. The throne will grow taller. And somewhere, deep beneath the fury, a final question flickers, just before it is extinguished forever. When there is nothing left of you, will Khorne still be satisfied? Silence follows the question, and for the first time since you were claimed, the war hesitates. Not stops, never stops, but it falters, like a heartbeat skipping a beat. You stand amid the carnage of a shattered world, your axe buried in the torso of something that was once a champion of another god. Its body dissolves into ash and screaming light, pulled back into the warp, leaving only its skull in your grasp. Around you, the battle still rages, demons charging, tanks burning, the sky torn open by orbital fire. But that final forbidden thought lingers. When there is nothing left of you, will Khorne still be satisfied? The skull in your hand feels heavier than it should. You do not know why that matters. You do not know how the thought survived at all. But it does, and it changes the way the world looks for a single, dangerous moment. The blood-soaked horizon seems flatter. The endless violence briefly feels repetitive, efficient, hollow. The realization hits like a blade slipped between ribs. You are not becoming more powerful. You are becoming interchangeable. The drums of war thunder again, louder, furious, as if the realm itself senses your deviation. Rage surges up instinctively, smothering doubt beneath reflex and fury. You roar and hurl yourself back into combat, cleaving through bodies, ripping skulls free, drowning the thought beneath fresh oceans of blood. For a time, an eternity, a heartbeat, it works. Until you die again. This death is different, not in pain or spectacle, but in how quickly it comes. A blade of impossible cold pierces your chest, wielded by something ancient and elegant, something that kills not for rage, but for perfection. Your vision fractures into shards of crimson and black. As your form unravels, you expect the familiar pull, the chains, the throne, the reforging. Instead, you fall. There is no ground beneath you, no firestorm to catch your descent. You tumble through layers of the warp, through echoes of wars you have fought and wars yet to come. Visions tear past you, empires burning, champions rising, gods feasting. And threaded through them all is the same truth, now impossible to ignore. Khorne does not remember faces. He remembers numbers. You crash into a realm that should not exist. It is quieter here, though quiet in the warp is never silent. The sky is dark, not red, and the ground is a plain of cracked obsidian stretching to a distant horizon. No drums beat, no war cries echo. At the center of the plain stands a figure you recognize instantly, though you have never seen it before. A demon prince, not towering, not roaring. It stands still, its armor dulled, its once mighty wings tattered and folded. Its axe is planted in the ground like a gravestone. Skulls surround it in a wide circle, arranged with care instead of carelessness. It turns to you slowly. Its eyes burn with the same fire as yours, but behind them is something unfamiliar. Awareness. "So," it says, its voice like grinding stone. You notice too. The words should enrage you. Insolence is death, questioning is weakness. And yet you do not attack, you cannot. Something in its presence pins you in place more firmly than chains ever did. It gestures to the skulls at its feet. These were mine, once, each one earned, each one mattered, or so I believed. A flicker of memory stirs in you, countless skulls taken, offered, forgotten. You realize with a creeping dread that you cannot recall any single one. Not truly. What happens, the demon prince continues, when the supply exceeds the need? The question echoes your own. It explains without mercy. How ascension is not reward, but refinement. How those who burn brightest are consumed fastest. How individuality is a flaw, sanded down until only function remains. Demon princes are not kings. They are tools sharpened until they break. I was once favored, it says almost gently. A name spoken with approval. Then another rose, and another, and another. The throne does not grow attached. You feel the truth of it resonate deep within you, vibrating against whatever remains of your soul. The prince steps closer, and for the first time since your death as a mortal, you feel something like fear. Do you know what happens to those who are no longer useful? It asks. The realm trembles. The sky splits open in a vertical wound of blinding red light. Chains descend, not glowing with runes but slick with fresh blood. The gaze falls upon you again, vast, uncaring, absolute. Khorne has found you. The demon prince laughs, a sound stripped of joy. There is your answer. The chains wrap around the prince first. It does not struggle, it does not scream. It simply looks at you as it is dragged upward, its form already beginning to unravel, armor cracking, wings tearing free. In moments it is gone, its essence ripped apart and recycled, its skull likely already forgotten among trillions. The chains shift. They reach for you. Instinct screams at you to submit, to welcome the pull, to let yourself be reforged once more into a cleaner, sharper weapon. That path is familiar, easy, safe in its own way. But the vision of the prince's quiet end burns in your mind. You do the unthinkable. You resist. The warp convulses as you tear free, ripping yourself sideways through reality, fleeing not toward battle but away from it. Pain unlike anything you have known tears through you as you abandon Khorne's current, plunging into unaligned chaos. Pieces of you shear away, strength, rage, certainty, but something fragile and dangerous remains intact. Choice. You crash back into real space like a meteor. The impact annihilates a city block, throwing up a mushroom cloud of dust and fire. Alarms scream, sirens wail, mortals scatter in blind terror. You rise from the crater, broken, diminished, your armor cracked, your weapon dull. For the first time since your ascension, the blood around you does not sing. You feel empty. Bolt of fire rips into you, explosive rounds detonating against your flesh. Pain registers sharply, vividly, without the familiar ecstasy. You stagger, almost fall. Imperial soldiers stare in disbelief as the monster before them bleeds like something real. In their eyes, you see not just fear, but hope. A single guardsman charges you, bayonet fixed, screaming prayers through tears. The moment stretches. You could kill him. Even now, you are capable of it. One swing, one skull. Khorne's gaze presses against the edges of reality, waiting. Your arm trembles, and then, impossibly, you lower your weapon. The guardsman hesitates, confusion shattering his momentum. A heartbeat later, an artillery shell obliterates both of you in a white-hot flash. As your consciousness fragments once more, you expect oblivion, or chains, or fire. Instead, you drift, not upward, not downward, sideways. Voices whisper, not commands, not promises, but questions. You feel hands that do not grip, presences that observe instead of judge. The universe seems wider here, more uncertain. And in that uncertainty, as your essence scatters across the immaterium, a final realization settles in. Not as rage, but as clarity. Khorne does not fear rebellion. He does not punish doubt. He simply replaces it. As something ancient and patient begins to gather the fragments of what you have become, the war drums fade into the distance, and a new, far more dangerous question takes shape. If even a god of slaughter can discard his champions, what else in this universe is lying to you about the cost of devotion? The fragments do not come back together gently. They are drawn in from across impossible distances, pulled through layers of unreality like iron filings toward a hidden magnet. Each piece carries a sensation with it. Heat from plasma fire, the echo of prayers screamed in terror, the fading taste of blood that is no longer there. You feel them reattach one by one, not into a body, but into awareness. You awaken without eyes, yet you see. You awaken without lungs, yet you breathe. Around you stretches a place that refuses definition. Not the screaming madness of the warp, not the cold certainty of real space, but something between. A corridor formed from abandoned possibilities. Shattered memories float like debris. A soldier kneeling in the mud, a demon roaring in triumph, a guardsman lowering his weapon in confusion. They drift past and dissolve before you can grasp them. You realize with a slow, creeping unease that nothing is forcing you to be whole. For the first time since your death, cohesion is optional. That terrifies you more than any battlefield ever did. A presence observes from the periphery, vast but restrained like a star seen through fog. It does not seize you, it does not brand you. It waits. The silence stretches, thick with expectation. And in that silence, you feel the absence of rage like a missing limb. You had thought rage was power. Without it, you discover how loud the universe truly is. Every war ever fought presses against you at once. Not just the glorious clashes remembered by history, but the small, desperate violence too, the knife in the alley, the riot trampled under boots, the quiet execution behind a sealed door. You feel them all as pressure, as static, as a weight that threatens to scatter you again. Understanding dawns, slow and terrible. Khorne was never the source of violence. He was its echo. The realization fractures something deep within you. The god you feared, served, fled from, he was not the origin of slaughter, only its loudest celebration. The wars of the galaxy would rage with or without him. He merely harvested what was already there. And you were never chosen. You were abundant. The presence draws closer, and now you sense its nature. Not benevolent, not cruel, but analytical. It studies the shape you are struggling to hold, the scars burned into your essence by devotion and rebellion alike. You are inefficient, it observes, the thought sliding into you without sound. But you are interesting. Images flood you, not visions of conquest, but of manipulation. Wars nudged into existence by a whispered rumor. Crusades redirected by a falsified prophecy. Billions dying not in berserk fury, but in carefully engineered desperation. Violence refined, focused, optimized. You recoil instinctively, fragments of old rage flaring up in defense. This is worse than Khorne. This is bloodshed without honesty. The presence seems amused. You confuse simplicity with truth, it replies. Rage is easy. Control is difficult. Which do you think endures? A crack opens in the corridor, spilling cold light. Through it, you glimpse the galaxy again, not as a battlefield, but as a machine. Armies move like cogs. Faith turns like a gear. Entire civilizations grind themselves to dust to keep the system turning. You see where you once fit. A hammer. Nothing more. The corridor shudders violently. A roar rolls through the void, so deep it warps the concept of sound. The pressure of it drives you inward, compressing your fragments together by force rather than choice. The blood god has noticed your absence. The presence withdraws instantly, retreating into abstraction, leaving you exposed. Chains tear through the corridor, not descending but erupting from all directions at once. They slam into your essence, searing it with familiar agony. The rage surges back unbidden, reflexive and intoxicating. For a moment, surrender feels inevitable. Then you remember the demon prince's eyes as it was unmade. The rage does not vanish, but it changes. Instead of drowning you, it sharpens. You twist, not with brute force, but with intent. The chains strain, surprised as you pull yourself into a tighter, smaller configuration, less powerful, more precise. You slip between links, shedding fragments deliberately, leaving behind echoes of fury that snap uselessly in Khorne's grasp. The god's roar intensifies, no longer indifferent. Annoyed. You plunge through the thinning corridor and burst back into real space once more, not in fire, but in silence. You emerge above a planet locked in perpetual twilight. Vast hive spires pierce low-hanging clouds, their lights flickering like dying stars. There is war here, but it has not yet ignited. Tension coils through the streets. Propaganda screens blare half-truths. Armies assemble, waiting for the order that will justify everything. You descend unseen, intangible, drifting through walls and minds alike. You taste fear before it becomes panic. You sense hatred before it finds a target. The ingredients of massacre are all present, patiently awaiting ignition. And you understand. Khorne fed on the end of violence. This feeds on the beginning. A voice rises from the depths of the city, not spoken aloud, but broadcast through belief. A preacher calling for purity, a commander demanding preemptive action, a whisper that paints neighbors as enemies. You feel the pressure again, not Khorne's crushing weight, but something subtler, guiding probabilities, aligning outcomes, The presence from the corridor is here, dispersed, embedded in systems and symbols rather than chains and fire. You could leave. You could let the war happen, let the blood flow, let Khorne feast on the aftermath as he always has. The galaxy would not notice the difference. But now, for the first time, you see the shape of choice clearly enough to fear it. Interfering would not be heroic. It would not be clean. It would require lies, manipulation, sacrifice measured in futures rather than bodies. You would become something else entirely, no longer a weapon, but a hand on the lever that decides when weapons are used. The thought sickens and fascinates you in equal measure. The first shots ring out below as a riot turns into an uprising. Armored vehicles roll forward. Orders are given. History begins to harden. You hover above it all, unseen, unclaimed, balanced on a knife's edge between gods and ideals that have no name. For the first time since your soul was taken, the question is no longer what a god wants from you. It is what you are willing to become when no god is watching. You hover above the city as the first true screams begin. They rise from narrow hab streets and manufacturing yards, from transit platforms where crowds realize too late that there is nowhere left to run. Shock batons crack. Lasfire flashes in sharp, disciplined bursts. Blood spills not in glorious arcs, but in sudden, ugly sprays that stain concrete and drain into rusted gutters. This is not war yet. This is ignition. For a moment, you do nothing. Silence gathers around you, fragile and strained, like the pause before thunder. You feel every decision forming below, each order barked into a vox, each fearful finger tightening on a trigger. Probability knots itself into a single tightening spiral. This is the moment where futures narrow. You slip downward. Passing through walls and flesh alike, you move among them, unseen, unfelt, a ghost threaded through the machinery of violence. A commander hesitates over a tactical display, doubt flickering behind his eyes before training crushes it flat. You brush past him, and the doubt lingers a fraction longer than it should, not enough to stop him, enough to delay. In the streets, a rioter stumbles over a fallen body and looks down instead of forward. Horror replaces rage. The charge falters, just for a second. Tiny changes, insignificant on their own. Together they begin to matter. The pressure returns almost immediately, not crushing, not roaring, watching. You feel the blood god's attention slide across the unfolding violence like a blade testing armor. Every shot fired, every skull cracked, sends ripples through the immaterium. The familiar hunger stirs in you in response, reflexive and warm. It would be so easy to give in, to push, to turn this riot into a massacre worthy of notice. You force yourself to drift higher, away from the heat of it. The other presence answers in kind. It does not speak, but you feel alignment occurring, data streams shifting, command channels clogging with contradictory orders, faith fragments nudged into paranoia instead of fury. The riot spreads laterally instead of exploding outward. Containment replaces annihilation. Below, fewer die than should have. The realization sends a strange tremor through you, not triumph, responsibility. Each life spared creates a ripple just as real as any death. You feel the weight of it settle into your fragments, anchoring them, giving you shape through consequence rather than command. You are no longer drifting. You are choosing. The gods notice. The warp darkens overhead, clouds boiling into the suggestion of a vast horned silhouette. The drums begin again, distant but accelerating, like an approaching storm front. Khorne does not intervene yet. He does not need to. The galaxy is still doing his work for him. The other presence tightens its grip, drawing closer to you now, no longer distant and observational. You sense intent sharpening. You cannot stall forever, it presses. You must decide what you are. Images surge through you, possible futures branching outward. In one, you fade back into the blood god's current, individuality burned away until nothing remains but function. In another, You disperse completely, your fragments lost, harmless, irrelevant. In a third, darker path, you remain as you are now, manipulating outcomes, trading visible slaughter for invisible atrocity. There is no clean road. Below, the riot collapses into a brutal stalemate. Smoke chokes the streets. Sirens wail endlessly. Bodies lie where they fell, uncollected, uncounted. Survivors stare at each other across barricades, hatred cooling into something colder and more enduring. You feel it then, a familiar spike of sensation, a kill. Somewhere nearby, a soldier caves in a skull with the butt of his rifle. The act is small, personal, unnoticed by history, but it sings in the warp all the same. A thread snaps taut between you and the throne you fled. Khorne's gaze sharpens. You recoil instinctively, but this time, you do not run. Instead, you look back. The connection is thinner than you remember, not weaker, narrower, focused. It dawns on you that the blood god's power has always relied on abundance, on excess. He is strongest when violence is loud and plentiful. Subtlety starves him. The thought is dangerous. It is also liberating. You push outward, not against Khorne directly, but against the conditions that feed him. You dampen surges of fury before they crest. You redirect battles into sieges. You turn charges into withdrawals, massacres into stalemates. Wars still happen. People still die. But the rhythm changes. The drums falter. For the first time, you feel something like resistance from the blood god, not wrath, but irritation. His realm shudders, not with rage, but with imbalance. The skull throne does not shrink, but it stops growing. That is when you feel it. A hook, sharp and sudden, driven into your essence from an entirely different direction. Cold, analytical, precise. The other presence is no longer content to observe. You misunderstand. It presses harder now. You are not preventing violence, you are refining it. And refinement creates dependency. You see it instantly. The cities you influence stabilize, but under harsher control. The commanders you delay become more cautious, more authoritarian. The riots that fail today become purges tomorrow. Fewer skulls now, more later, cleaner, quieter. You are not starving the gods. You are changing which one eats. The revelation hits harder than any chain. You thrash, trying to pull away, but the web of causality you have helped spin clings to you. Every choice you made has weight, and that weight has momentum. You cannot simply undo it without tearing yourself apart. Below, a new order is declared. Martial law, curfews, summary executions authorized in the name of peace. The crowds disperse, cowed, broken, alive, for now. The warp above the planet churns violently as two immense pressures converge, rage and control, excess and precision, neither speaking, neither yielding. And between them, suspended by consequence rather than chains, is you. You feel yourself being pulled taut, stretched between gods that were never meant to share their prey. The strain builds, fragment by fragment, thought by thought. Something has to give. As the sky over the hive splits with distant lightning and the first true armies begin to mobilize, you realize the terrible truth forming at the center of it all. You are no longer running from the gods. You are becoming the battlefield they will fight over. And somewhere deep within the Imperium, something ancient shifts its attention, as if finally noticing that the storm it has been shaping is about to break. The pressure becomes unbearable, not pain, not fear, weight. Two vast forces pull at you from opposite directions, stretching your essence thin until every fragment vibrates with strain. The Imperium around you warps, colors bleeding into one another, reality folding like overheated metal. Below, the hive world trembles as troop carriers thunder through streets and orbital cannons realign in the upper atmosphere. War is no longer a possibility here. It is an appointment. Khorne's presence swells first. It is not subtle. It never was. Rage floods the warp in crashing waves, hot and immediate, each surge carrying the echo of 1 billion battle cries. The skull throne looms closer in your perception, its mountains of bone grinding together as if impatient. Every death on the planet sends a spark racing toward it, and each spark tries to drag you along. You feel the old pull return, familiar, comforting, honest in its brutality. Then the other pressure tightens, cold, structured, inescapable. It manifests not as a roar, but as alignment. Probabilities locking into place. Futures snapping shut like iron doors. You feel entire campaigns being planned in advance, casualty numbers accepted as acceptable margins, faith weaponized into obedience. Violence not wasted in frenzy, but invested. You are caught between the scream and the calculation, and you finally understand the lie they both share. Neither God cares why blood is spilled, only that it is. The realization hits you with quiet force, and for a moment, everything slows. The battlefield does not vanish. The gods do not retreat. But your perception sharpens, narrowing inward. You look at yourself, not as a demon, not as a weapon, but as a process. A sequence of choices reinforced by reward and punishment until they felt inevitable. You were never meant to choose. That was the flaw. The hive world below erupts into open war. Barricades are overrun. Armored columns punch through hab blocks, grinding civilians beneath treads. In the upper spires, nobles watch the chaos through reinforced windows and call it necessity. On the ground, soldiers chant litanies to drown out their doubt. Skulls begin to pile up. The warp screams. Khorne surges forward, seizing the moment, pouring power into the violence. You feel his favor spike as berserk charges break defensive lines and combat devolves into close-range slaughter. The drums thunder so loudly now, they threaten to tear you apart. The other presence counters instantly. Supply lines tighten. Retreats are ordered at precise moments to maximize long-term attrition. Executions are broadcast to enforce compliance. The war becomes efficient. You are stretched to the breaking point. Fragments of you begin to shear away, dissolving into raw emotion and data alike. Rage tears loose. Calculation fractures. You feel yourself thinning, losing coherence, becoming what the gods always wanted, a resource to be divided and consumed. And then, in the midst of it all, you hear something that does not belong. A human voice, not a prayer, not a scream, a laugh. It cuts through the warp like a blade through cloth, faint but unmistakable. You follow it downward, past the thunder of artillery and the clash of armored giants, into a collapsed transit tunnel where a handful of civilians huddle together. They are filthy, bleeding, terrified, and alive. A child laughs as someone produces a battered toy from beneath the rubble. The sound is fragile, defiant, absurd. It should mean nothing. Instead, it hits you harder than any god's gaze ever has. That laugh was not planned. It was not efficient. It did not feed on rage or control. It existed despite them. In that instant, you see a truth neither god accounts for. Violence is not inevitable. Suffering is not destiny. They are habits, and habits can be broken. The gods recoil, not physically, but conceptually. That moment does not register to them as power or threat. It cannot be harvested. It cannot be quantified. It simply is. You feel something new take shape inside you. Not rage, not calculation, refusal. You stop pulling, you stop pushing, you let go. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. The tension between the gods snaps, not outward but inward, collapsing around you. The warp implodes into a blinding, silent shockwave that ripples across the Imperium. Khorne's roar cuts off mid-thunder, not silenced but displaced, as if reality itself has flinched. The other presence fractures into dissonant vectors, its perfect alignments unraveling into noise. You are at the center of it. For a heartbeat that feels like eternity, you are nowhere. No realm claims you. No god touches you. You exist as pure awareness, unanchored, unsupported, free. The cost is immediate. Your form begins to dissolve, not violently, but gently, like ash drifting from a dying fire. There is no pain in it, only exhaustion. You feel centuries of war finally release their grip on you. Memories fade, not ripped away, but set down. Below, the battle does not stop, it never does. But something subtle changes. Orders hesitate. A charge breaks before it reaches full fury. An officer lowers his weapon for half a second too long and lives with the consequence of that choice. Small things, human things. You feel yourself thinning further, becoming less a presence and more a resonance. A distortion in expectation. Where gods pull, you loosen. Where violence seeks excess, you introduce friction. Khorne's gaze brushes past you one last time, not in anger, but confusion. You are no longer useful to him. You do not add to the tally. The other presence withdraws, its interest cooling as your influence becomes unpredictable, unscalable. You drift, lighter now, toward dissolution. As the noise of war dulls into distant thunder, you realize the final truth with a strange, quiet peace. You did not defeat the gods. You reminded them they are not alone in shaping reality. Your awareness spreads thin, diffusing into the countless moments where someone chooses not to kill when they could. Where an order is questioned. Where rage falters just enough. The galaxy does not change overnight. It never will. But somewhere, in the vast, grinding machinery of endless war, a single laugh echoes on. And for the first time in an age without number, the drums miss a beat. The echo of that missed beat does not vanish. It lingers, not as sound but as absence. In the wake of the shockwave, the Imperium settles into unfamiliar stillness. Not peace, never peace, but a quieter tension, like a battlefield after the guns fall silent, and no one is quite sure the fighting is finished. The warp continues to churn, yet something essential has shifted. Its currents are less certain, less sure of their destination. You are no longer a shape within it. You are a trace. Awareness drifts, thinned to translucence, spread across moments rather than anchored to form. You do not see as you once did. You feel instead subtle pressures, emotional gravity wells, choices trembling on the edge of decision. You exist where hesitation lives. On the hive world, the war winds down into something uglier and quieter. Reconstruction begins under watchful eyes. Propaganda reframes the conflict as necessary, inevitable. Memorials rise while mass graves are filled without ceremony. The galaxy does what it always does. It moves on. And yet, in a barracks overlooking the ruins, a soldier stares at his hands and cannot remember when they stopped shaking. He re-enlists anyway, but something inside him resists the old fire. He fights because he must, not because he wants to. That difference is small. It is everything. In a cathedral stripped by shelling, a preacher rewrites a sermon, removing a single line that once glorified martyrdom. The faithful will not notice. The God he serves might. The universe registers it as a microscopic deviation. In a transit tunnel long since cleared, a child keeps the battered toy, repairing it again and again with scavenged wire. Years later, when war returns, as it always does, she will hide others instead of picking up a weapon. No one will record her name. You feel these moments pass through you like light through mist. You do not guide them. You do not claim them. You simply do not interfere when the choice bends away from blood. Khorne rages on. Of course he does. Across 1,000 fronts, axes still rise and fall. Champions still scream his name as they charge into oblivion. The Skull Throne still towers, fed by the galaxy's endless appetite for conflict. You sense him dimly now, like a distant storm whose thunder no longer shakes your bones. He has adapted. He always will. But something has been taken from him, not power, not worship, but certainty. Violence still comes, but not always in the form he expects, not always with the same abandon. The wars grow more complex, less pure, harder to predict. That uncertainty irritates him. It weakens him in ways numbers never could. The other presence remains as well, fractured but persistent, refining strategies, optimizing suffering, turning chaos into system. It too feels your absence like a flaw in a design that once seemed perfect. It cannot account for you anymore. Neither can erase you. Because you are not an enemy. You are a question. Time passes strangely now. Decades blur into instants. Centuries drift by like clouds. Empires rise and rot. Names are forgotten. Gods endure. And still, the trace remains. Sometimes, in moments of extreme violence, you feel the old pull try to reassert itself. Rage surges, blood sings. The offer is there, implicit and eternal. Return, be whole again, be powerful, be certain. Each time, the memory of that laugh answers instead, not loud, not defiant, simply real. You understand at last what happened when Khorne claimed your soul. He did not damn you, he simplified you. He stripped away everything that complicated violence, everything that questioned it, until all that remained was function. You mistook that clarity for truth. You mistook approval for meaning. What you reclaimed was not goodness or heroism or salvation. It was complexity. The understanding that existence is not a ledger, that choice matters even when it fails, especially when it fails. That the universe is shaped not only by gods and wars, but by the countless quiet moments that never make it into legend. You fade further, awareness stretching thin, dissolving into the background noise of reality. Soon, even this perspective will vanish. You will not watch anymore. You will not remember. But that was never the point. The point was never to win. It was to interrupt. Somewhere, far away, a warrior pauses before delivering a killing blow, just long enough for something unexpected to happen. Somewhere else, a commander chooses retreat over glory. Somewhere else still, someone refuses to hate when hate would be easier. The galaxy remains brutal. It remains vast. It remains cruel. But it is no longer inevitable in the way it once seemed. As the last remnants of you disperse into the fabric of moments yet to come, a final thought drifts free, unclaimed by any god. If a single soul can step out of the cycle of blood, even for a moment, what does that say about the power we give to the gods who demand it? And more importantly, what does it say about the power we still have when we choose not to?